Could we actually see the Cup Series racing on a dirt track in the next couple of years? Tony Stewart seems to think so. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric, and welcome once again to Out of the Groove. Midweek edition of the show. There wasn't a whole lot of news coming out of this past weekend's race at Kentucky. No penalties, no big deal there. And going into this weekend's race at Loudon, there's not that much really to talk about. So I turned to you guys on Instagram and I asked you all what you wanted me to talk about here in this midweek episode, and I guess it really wasn't that surprising, but I got a pretty common request. Tonight is the Eldora Dirt Derby race thing that the Truck Series does every year. And a lot of you guys wanted me to talk about that, as well as the testing that the Cup Series did yesterday at the Charlotte Roval. So that's going to be the focus of today's episode. The annual Eldora truck race is tonight, and this, since it started a few years ago, this has proven to be must-see TV, even if you're just kind of a casual truck fan, even if you're just a casual NASCAR fan in general, don't pay that close of attention to the Truck Series at all. This race is often worth watching. It's not too often you get to see these big machines sliding around pretty much out of control like that. Plus, Ryan Newman is in the field for some reason, so there's a name you've probably heard of. But of course, I will be watching. It's fun to have a midweek NASCAR race. You don't really see that very often. In fact, this is really the only midweek race on the schedule. The Truck Series is currently the only national NASCAR series that races at this track, but according to track owner Tony Stewart, he thinks it's very realistic that that could change in the coming years. Tony Stewart, you guys know, he's been retired a couple years now. He's a former NASCAR champion. He's raced in just about every type of race car there is. He owns Eldora Speedway, and he made some interesting comments earlier this week about the potential future of the track. Fans, if you're out there, think about starting to put some pressure on NASCAR. I think we need to get an Xfinity race. If we could get an Xfinity race and it was successful, maybe one day we could get a Cup race here at Eldora. And I think that's something everybody would like to see. And you got that damn right, Tony. I'd love to see it. But now, what are the odds that it would actually come to fruition? I mean, we just recently got a Truck Series race here only a few short years ago, and while yes, they have been pretty successful to this point, you know, the Xfinity Series and especially the Cup Series, you know, it starts to become more daunting. Keep in mind now that no change to the Xfinity or Cup schedule could happen until 2020. Next year's schedules are all locked down. 2020 is the year a lot of people expect the schedule to change a pretty significant amount, so no changes could happen until then at the earliest. As far as the technology behind making this happen, that's not too far-fetched. I mean, we've been able to prove with the Truck Series that these big, heavy cars, machines can make it around this track, even when the drivers themselves, I mean, there's a lot of these truck drivers that haven't spent that much time on dirt, they've been able to get used to it and at least been able to run the race competitively. So as far as the drivers and the cars are concerned, I mean, there's really not much that needs to change. I mean, maybe a few changes in the car, maybe some changes with the tire. Brad Keselowski mentioned on Twitter that, you know, he would be all for this potential idea if the tires were different. I'm not a tire expert, so I don't know what would need to change exactly, but something more suitable for the Cup cars, I guess, would have to be in play. But if a different tire is all we're talking about, that's not too difficult. NASCAR and Goodyear could definitely do that. So that's two important boxes checked, but the only box that's kind of what makes this deal a little iffy is the fact that Eldora Speedway can only hold roughly 25 to 30,000 people at its venue, most of that being like up on a hill, standing room only. There's not that many, you know, permanent seats in this venue. So the fact that you can only fit maybe 30,000 people tops, that's not that many people. For a truck race crowd, that's pretty reasonable. You rarely see more than 30,000 people at a truck race at most other tracks, so 30,000 people can jam pack into Eldora for a truck race. Not too big a deal. But if we're gonna look at the Cup Series specifically, you know, I know people say attendance is down, and it is, but these races are still pulling in 60, 70, 80, 100,000 people on a fairly regular basis. And Eldora Speedway, you know, can't come close to holding on to that. So from NASCAR's business perspective, it might not make perfect sense to put an Eldora race in there in place of, you know, a Las Vegas race or a New Hampshire race or a Pocono race. It might not make sense. Because while I bet TV ratings would be very good for those races, actual in-attendance ticket sales would, you know, it'll sell out. You'll sell all 30,000 tickets, but you're still going to sell a lot less than you would if you went to even Pocono. Pocono gets 60 to 70,000 fans a race weekend, and it's Pocono. So while the event might be really awesome, you're only going to be able to sell about half as many tickets as you would at another track. So I think logistics are the only thing really preventing Tony Stewart from getting his wish and getting a Cup or even an Xfinity Series race there in the near future. Now, one idea is that NASCAR makes this more of a like an all-star race, where it's not one of the 36 points-paying races, it's just, you know, a one-off race maybe on a Wednesday. That might be more reasonable from a business standpoint because you wouldn't be taking the place of another race, and instead it would just kind of be an additional small all-star race event. I know they're never going to move the all-star race from Charlotte, at least not for the time being, but perhaps they could fit this in somewhere else. Maybe even, I know it's cold up in Ohio, but maybe even slide it in there during the off season as some sort of event that maybe a dozen or 2 dozen drivers are able to go to. I don't know if any of that's at all realistic, but I think the idea that Eldora could take an actual permanent spot away from another track on the NASCAR schedule, at least for the Cup and Xfinity Series, I think that's a little far-fetched, at least for the next few years. I like where Tony's head's at, though. He's dreaming big. And, NASCAR, needs something to continue to liven up the crowd these days, something to really bring new hot attention to the sport. And, a dirt race around one of the biggest, more famous dirt tracks in America would be pretty cool. It's not a crazy pipe dream, but right now it's not very close to being reality. I think there's a realistic chance we could get an Xfinity race in the next couple of years, but a Cup Series race, I mean, heck, you go from a Truck Series race that might sell 20 to 30,000 tickets a race weekend, Xfinity will sell maybe 40,000 tickets, but in that same weekend, the Cup race will get 100,000 people, 80,000 people. It's just the Cup Series is so much bigger and is such a big draw compared to these other two series. It's hard to fit them. It's going to be hard to condense the Cup Series fans into that small venue. It will. But it'd be awesome and I'd love to see it. So let's see if we can make it happen, guys. So the other thing that happened this week, and it was happening basically all day Tuesday, was another test for the Charlotte Roval. And boy, for a testing session, it was actually pretty expensive. Many drivers, I can think of Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex Jr. off the top of my head, have pretty much candidly said that this is going to be a very challenging race that's probably going to be unlike a lot of things we've ever seen. And this test session basically lived up to that. Pretty early on in the session, we had Alex Bowman get into the wall. We had Ryan Blaney spin out and hit the tire barrier pretty hard. We had Eric Jones spin the car out. And then worst of all, we had William Byron completely lose the brakes and just go head on into one of those tire barriers. Some pretty big carnage for what was supposed to be a pretty laid-back test session. And so it's led to a lot of debate amongst fans. What is this race going to look like? Is it going to be a total wreck fest where all bets are off? Or are the drivers going to play it safe enough that, we don't have too many major issues? Because introducing a brand new kind of makeshift road course into the schedule, that's one thing. That is one big challenge. But keep in mind, guys, this race in September is in the playoffs. And not just in the playoffs, it's the final race of the first round. There is going to be a lot riding on this race, and where a lot of people finish is going to be very, very, very important. We keep joking about these big three. Oh, I'm tired of Truex winning, I'm tired of Harvick winning, tired of Kyle Busch winning. They need to keep winning because as many bonus points as they're getting may not protect them from this first round race at Charlotte's Roval. I mean, 4 of the best drivers in the sport just wiped out completely on their own. Imagine them trying to drive 300 miles or whatever it is around this place with 40 other cars out there. I never thought we'd see a bigger wildcard race in the playoffs than Talladega there in round 2, but we have one right here. This Roval, this road course oval hybrid that doesn't really know what it is going to give people problems. Obviously, I think a lot of drivers are going to try to be as conservative as possible, protect points, protect their position in the standings. But what we've seen, at least in these tests and practices, is sometimes that's still not enough to keep you from spinning out. These guys still just can't hang on to their cars sometimes. And if you're out there with 39, 40 other cars, you're at the mercy of what a lot of other drivers are going to do. And when those tight quarters, with this new layout, this new track, this odd surface, the transition from one type of track surface to the other, to a lot of banking to no banking, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. One thing I will point out, at least from this last test session, where we did have those 4, incidents where drivers spun or crashed, you will note that all 4 of those drivers I named are all some of the younger drivers. You got Ryan Blaney, Eric Jones, William Byron, Alex Bowman, a rookie, and a few guys in there just their first few seasons. So it's the young drivers that maybe are struggling the most. So maybe this race will still play to the veterans' strengths, although like I said, I remember a few weeks ago, Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex Jr. Were nervous about how this race was going to go, and those are 2 of the best drivers in the series. So all bets are off, really. I don't even have a prediction. I don't know what to think going into that race. We're going to have to wait until that weekend actually gets here, which is still a couple months away. We're going to have to really start to see how teams and drivers look during those practice sessions, during qualifying before. I don't even think, with 10 laps to go, we might not have a good idea of who's going to win this thing because it just seems like it's going to be a crapshoot. I'll be curious to know what you guys think because it's hard to really pin down and have a strong opinion about this race. I hope it's a good race. I hope it's fun and exciting and produces enough passing, enough, parity, enough battles without being just a total crash fest. I hope it's a good race because I'd love for NASCAR to have a 3rd road course on the schedule and especially have one in the playoffs. Fans have been asking for it for years, and I think this is a very good experiment, but hopefully it's not a failed experiment at the end of the day. I want it to be successful, but man, I am a little nervous. But anyway, guys, that is my show today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, of course, to Michael Harrison and the rest of our outstanding Patreon sponsors. You too can be a Patreon sponsor by checking out down below. There's special perks that come with that as well, not just having your name featured on the show. So thank you for checking that out. You can follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. Links to those are also in the description. Thanks again to everyone who commented on Instagram to help give this episode some direction. I appreciate that. And I forgot to mention something kind of important, at least to me. This is going to be the last episode in this apartment. I've spent almost a year now in this small room, spent countless hours editing on their computer, spent even more hours talking to you guys basically in this same arrangement. So I'll be moving in with a friend actually for a few weeks in between leases. My next apartment I'm not allowed to move in for a few weeks, so I'm going to be kind of bouncing around here, so the sets are going to change, but I'm going to try to continue with as regular of uploads as I possibly can. So just bear with me if next week I'm filming from the back of a pickup truck. Hopefully you know why now, because I will be who knows where. Thanks everyone for watching once again. I appreciate all the support. I'll see you guys again very soon. Let's have a good weekend here at Loudon. I know I didn't talk about New Hampshire that much, but it's, it'll be good. If you missed it, if you want me to talk about my predictions for New Hampshire, be sure to watch our podcast tomorrow night that I do with everybody at 8 p.m. Eastern. Go check that out, because I'll be giving you, our predictions for this weekend's New Hampshire race. I just wanted to talk about the dirt race and the Roval today, because I think that's what you guys wanted. At least that's what you guys asked for. So thanks again. I'll wrap this up. Have a good one, everyone. Have a great weekend. See ya.